The first broadcast. At 2:17, the radio said my mother would die at 2:17 tomorrow. I wasn't touching the dial. I wasn't even in the same room. The house was asleep, and the second hand on the kitchen clock sounded like a nail tapping a coffin lid. I had bought the radio that morning from an estate sale where everything smelled like camphor and grief. Mahogany cabinets, a wedding dress folded to yellow creases, a box of medals with the names scratched off. The radio sat alone on a lace doily, a 1947 shortwave with a honeycomb grill and a dial face like an amber eye. The tag hanging from the handle said, "Does not pick up anything." Picked up me. The first night I let it warm, tubes humming a soft animal sound. Static combed through the kitchen like rain on a tin roof. Then a voice bled in, genderless and precise, the way a scalpel has no accent. Obituaries for Tuesday. It read a name I'd never heard, a street I didn't know, an exact time and cause. It read another name, then a third, and then Maria Hale, 54, cardiac arrest, 2:17. My mother's name was a common coin. Every mall has 3 Mariahs, but the voice said our street, our number. My mother, who laughed with her whole torso, who sang Motown while burning toast. Cardiac arrest, 2:17. The time landed like a stamp on wet paper. Smudged, permanent. I told myself it was a prank. Pirate broadcast. Some college kid with a dark sense of humor and a list stolen from a hospital. When I went to unplug it, the cord sparked and bit my fingers. I left it running. I watched my mother sleep in the recliner with a blanket up to her chin, a crossword draped over her hand, and I told the night out loud I didn't believe it. Belief never asks permission. The next afternoon, I called her doctor. He said her cluster of headaches was from stress. He told me to buy decaf and stop reading alarmist blogs. At 10 p.m., I had her swallow water like it was a spell. At 11, I hid the radio under a dish towel. At midnight, I carried it to the garage, shut the door, and heard the voice through drywall. Maria Hale, 2:17. When the minute arrived, the house felt nervous. The refrigerator hiccuped. The furnace exhaled and held its breath. I watched her chest rise, fall, rise, then misstep. The breath after that was too shallow. The one after never came. The 911 operator kept saying my name as if a syllable could be a life raft. I counted compressions in a voice not mine. I begged in the language of childhood, please, please, please. Somewhere in the garage, a needle clicked from one notch to the next, an obedient metronome keeping time for an empty song. They called it cardiac arrest exactly at 2:17, exactly like the radio knew. I should have buried it with her. I should have smashed the honeycomb grill with a hammer and salted the pieces. Instead, I carried it back inside before dawn and set it on the table. The dial glowed with a patient amber. The casing was warm, like a cheek. It was waiting. I couldn't save my mother. But if this thing could see death coming, maybe I could run faster than it, just once, for someone else. I placed my hand on the cabinet the way you touch a door before walking into fire, and I turned the volume up. Detuning. If you twist the dial, someone else dies instead. That sentence didn't arrive in words. It arrived as a suspicion, like the taste of metal before lightning. The night after my mother's funeral, I sat with the radio in the kitchen. The house a museum of condolences. Lilies giving off a sweet rot, casseroles cooling like abandoned plans. The dial's amber eye watched me. The tubes purred. I told myself I was only listening to witness, not to meddle. Obituaries for Thursday, the voice said, precise as a paper cut. Name, age, cause, street, city, time, cadence of endings. Then, Anna Reed, 27, vehicular collision, 1912. Anna. It was the name on the barista's tag at the corner coffee shop, the one who drew crooked hearts in my latte. Anna Reed lived 5 blocks away. I knew because grief made me memorize small things to avoid the large one. I pictured her smile and felt the kitchen tilt. 1912 was 40 minutes from now. I don't remember standing. I remember the smell of dust when I lifted the back panel, the waxy feel of old capacitors, the stamp date, 1947, like the radio's baptismal certificate. I didn't know what I was doing, only that I had to do something. Somewhere I'd read about heterodyning, how two close frequencies create a third, a beat that isn't there until you force it to be. I pinched the tuning knob. I turned it a hair left. The static moaned. The voice paused, as if surprised to hear its own breath, then resumed with the tiniest slur. It corrected itself. Abby Reed, 19, vehicular collision, 1912. I froze. The shape of the letters had changed, but not the sentence. Reed, our same family, same initial. I turned the knob back to center, heart plummeting. Anna Reed, 27, vehicular collision, 1912. Forward a hair. Alan Reeves, 41, vehicular collision, 1912. Another R. Not Reed. Reeves. A different life colliding with the same certainty. I stopped breathing long enough to hear the refrigerator click. Somewhere outside, a dog barked twice as if counting. My fingers hovered over the dial like thieves. The rules arrived all at once, cruel and elegant. Detuned by a sliver and the name migrates to the next nearest match. Keep the time, keep the cause, keep the neighborhood if you can. The radio didn't argue. It accepted bribes paid in letters. 19 minutes. I ran. I didn't think about ethics. I thought about tires and blood and how a name tastes when you have to spit it out. On the corner I saw her. Anna, helmet on, straddling a bike at the crosswalk, a green scarf like a small flag. I threw myself into the road. Horns flashed. Brakes screamed. Somebody swore my name as if we were old friends. Anna caught my arm. You okay? No, your chain. I lied, pointing. It's loose. It wasn't. She looked down, and I led her and the moment to the sidewalk, babbling about sockets and safety as if words could sandbag fate. 1912 came and went. No crash. No sirens. My lungs tasted like pennies. I walked home trembling with a victory I didn't deserve. The kitchen met me with silence and the faint smell of hot dust. I put my hand on the cabinet. The wood was warmer than my palm. Obituaries for Thursday, update, the voice said, and something inside me shrank to a child. Alan Reeves, 41, vehicular collision, 1912. Survived by daughter Abby, 19. I saw it then, the two names I'd bumped like billiard balls. A father and a daughter, held apart by my trembling fingers and pushed together by them, too. I had saved a stranger with a green scarf and traded her for a family I would never meet. The radio did not congratulate me. It merely hummed, indifferent as weather. I turned the dial to center and left it there. My thumb had a crescent notch where my nail had dug in, a small wound shaped like a decision. Outside, a siren passed. Not for us, not anymore, just part of the city's breathing. I sat in the hum and learned the worst lesson of my life. You can save someone. You just have to choose who will die for them. Obituary of a town. The broadcast listed 12 names. All belonged to my street. I was eating cold casserole at the counter when the voice started its ritual, sharp as a paper cut. Obituaries for Saturday. Then it began to walk our block like a mail carrier with bad news. Mr. Patel at 101, aneurysm, 940. The twins from 103, carbon monoxide, for 12. Mrs. Ortega's husband, who never came outside without a hat, fall from a ladder, 1603. The voice marched up house numbers and down arteries, time caused precision. When it reached our address it skipped. I'd already paid that toll. Then it kept going, into the cul-de-sac, into children's rooms. I tasted tin. I called everyone I knew, left voicemails that sounded like a scam. Come to my kitchen. Bring extension cords. Bring anything. Grief had made me a collector of small things. Now panic made me a recruiter. By 9, they were jammed into the kitchen. Mr. Patel in slippers, the Ortega kids with sleep marks on their cheeks, the twins' mom clutching a carbon monoxide detector still in the box. Mrs. Ng from 115 set down a tray of ginger cookies like we were hosting a wake for the future. I pulled the back off the radio. The honeycomb grill looked like a hive that had kept working after the bees died. If we add noise, I said, it might scramble it, like throwing sand in a clock. What happens if it stops? Mr. Patel asked. Then we try again. I lied. We became an orchestra of household resistance. Hair dryers roared. An old box fan shook itself awake. Someone held a blender to the mouth of the radio and pulsed. Mrs. Ng set her induction cooker to boil nothing. The kitchen vibrated with a primitive hope. Louder, louder, louder. As if volume could be virtue. For a heartbeat, the voice faltered. It dragged its consonants through our storm, then pushed on. Update. The dial's amber eye pulsed. Additional decedent, the voice said, calm as a surgeon adding a line item. It read a 13th name I didn't recognize. Street, hours. Number. The foreclosed house with plywood windows. Cause. Undetermined interference. The blender stopped. The room breathed in. We tried again because fear is stubborn. When the static thickened enough to taste, the voice announced another update. Another name. 14. 15. The radio was keeping score. Each time we threw noise at it, it charged a fee in flesh. This is punishment, Mrs. Ng whispered, like a temple box for bad prayers. It's a ledger, I said, hearing my own theory bloom ugly. We're adding lines. The twins' mom lifted the plug from the wall with hands that shook. The appliances died off like cicadas, one by one. The house became a lung again. The voice, freed, continued briskly. Resuming, we stood in a silence that had weight. Outside, a delivery truck rattled past, oblivious. Somewhere, a lawn sprinkler ticked like slow applause. Mr. Patel took my arm. If nothing we do stops it, what can we do? Choose, I wanted to say. Twist the dial and offer a neighbor to save a stranger. Or don't and let schedule become scripture. I turned the volume to a whisper. The name still came, soft as breath through a bedroom door. When it ended, no one moved. We stared at the amber eye as if it would blink and forgive us. Finally, Mrs. Ng broke a cookie in half and put one piece in my palm, as if sugar could sweeten a verdict. Tomorrow, she said, not asking. We'll be together. Tomorrow, I said, memorizing the times like you memorize escape routes. I watched them file out into the nervous daylight and felt the block breathe around me. Each house a chest I could not keep rising. The radio hummed, satisfied. It had taught us its economy. Every attempt to drown it only made it speak more names. Number station 731. A dead station started answering me. The night was a pulled thread when I found the frequency, 7.431 megahertz, a seam where the static sounded tired. I'd been scanning for hours, chasing ghosts through the shortwave bands, when the whisper clicked into place. An old numbers format, read by a voice that wasn't human so much as habit. 71039 repeat. A pause. Repeat. I wrote the digits down because that's what grief does. It makes you obedient to anything that resembles order. A string of numbers split like ribs. 71.039 / -113.217. Not a phone, not a case file. Coordinates. The map app on my cracked screen put the pin in the scrubland beyond the rail yard, where the town grows its forgotten things. The door to the relay building at the edge of the field had a chain that remembered better hands. I brought bolt cutters and a fear that smelled like pennies. Inside, a skeleton of transmitters, racks stripped for parts, a desk the mice had turned into confetti. Dust lay over everything like an oath. On the far wall, a painted designation the color of old teeth. Station 731. Obituaries for. I began out of habit. The radio on my shoulder hissed, stung, then went very still, like an animal listening. Caretaker? The loudspeaker on the back wall said, though no power thrummed, though the breakers were down and the guts of the place were corpse cold. The word wasn't spoken. It was compiled from the throat of interference, a syllable carved out of nothing. Hail! My name scuffed the room. I didn't answer. I set the portable on the desk and plugged in a hand mic I'd soldered from a kit and stubbornness. What do you want? The static organized itself into a metronome, 3 ticks and a bleed of tone, the way a hospital monitors a heart it's planning to stop. Then the numbers again, slower, like a teacher with a reluctant student. 71.039.113.217. Repeat. I already went, I said, as if I could reason with an element. I'm here. A rise in the noise, the audio equivalent of a blink. Then another string. Depth. 1.8 meters. Repeat. Shovel. Dirt. Wrong answers. I dug behind the concrete pad where a generator once sat, my breath fogging the cold like cheap incense. At 6 feet, the soil turned to clay that coughed up a ribbon of rotted cloth. Then a button. Then a jaw that had learned to be quiet. At the very bottom, a tin plate glinted with a number stamped into it. 17. I sat back on my heels. The portable hissed in my lap like a pleased cat. War dead? I asked. Accident victims? The room answered with a new cadence. Not numbers now, but call and response. A catechism of function. Broadcast. Predict. Settle. Ledger. Ledger. I remembered the names scratched inside my radio's case, the trades I'd already made. My palms stung from the shovel. The ache felt like a signature. What is 731? I asked. Origin. A pause, as if the silence were a period. Debt collection. The voice fell back into static. From the hole came a smell like cold iron and old rain. I saw a field invisible on any map, a grid of unmarked dead who once paid for someone else's extension, interest compounding in bones. On the way out, I locked the chain behind me, absurd and polite. At home, I turned the kitchen radio on. The amber I woke like a conscience. Update, it said, and for a second I thought it meant me, my pulse, my breath. But it read a name I didn't know, a time that wasn't mine, the town's next appointment. I looked at the dirt under my nails and understood. The station hadn't answered because I was special. It answered because I was already on the ledger. The ledger. Mercy has handwriting. I discovered that the night the radio wouldn't cool down, as if the wood remembered a fever, and the amber dial kept a low, patient breath after I switched it off. I unscrewed the back plate to catch the heat, and the smell of singed dust rose like an old church. Inside the chassis, among tubes and capacitors the color of settled tea, the brass belly of the cabinet had been scratched with names. Not scratched, engraved, neat as an undertaker's ledger. Columns, dates, tiny arrows. A history of bargains cut on the inside of a throat. At the top, in careful hand, saved. Beneath it, a first list running back to 1949. Next to each name, a slash and something taken. Mrs. K. Row/taste, partial. Private L. Meyer/right hand. Infant. No name/fever. Transferred. The metal shivered under my touch like it could still feel the choosing. On the other side, due. Those columns were bare for the earliest years, then crowded toward the present, the writing tighter, desperate. Some entries were doubled, rescued once, paid twice. Next to one, the tool had slipped and cut a tiny, unintentional tear in the brass that looked like a sob. A folded paper lived behind the speaker, tucked like a confession. Onion skin thin as a lie. The ink had aged to the brown of old tea. I unfolded it with the stupid reverence grief teaches and read, Caretaker, mercy requires equivalence. The signal predicts. The instrument collects. To alter a fixed outcome, something of equal store value must be surrendered. The radio does not accept money. The radio will accept a sense, sight, hearing, taste, touch, smell, whole or in part. A memory, singular, familial, communal. A possession that contains a life, hair locket, wedding band, wedding dress if it held tears, a future, offspring, oath, voice. Ratios below. A finger is a minute, a hand, an hour, a childhood, a week, a voice, a cycle. Do not attempt to cheat. The static will charge interest. M. Under the signature, rows of arithmetic no school would teach. 3 children from river equals choir loses pitch. Permanent. 1 bus spared equals town festival canceled for a decade. Gathering energy never returns. My husband car equals my name, erased from everyone but me. I traced the last line and felt the cold of it go through my fingertip and into the bone. I thought of my mother's laugh and how grief already taxed it, eroding edges until even memory sounded dubbed. How much would it cost to sharpen her laugh again? Could I buy a minute to say goodbye properly? The ledger had an answer ready. Personal resurrections are priced by chorus. That meant many voices must pay. That meant the choir. The radio clicked on by itself, a polite throat clearing. Obituaries for Monday, the voice said, businesslike, and the names came like receipts. I folded the letter back and slid it into its hiding place, as if modesty could make it less true. The cabinet's inner skin gleamed with its tidy rows. I saw blank brass below, enough room for a few more trades if the hand were small and the letters tight. There are books you read and there are books that read you. This one wanted my signature. I set the back plate on, screws trembling in their threads. I listened to the voice finish its accounting. When it said update, I didn't reach for the dial. I reached for a pen. Static, baby. The voice cried like a newborn in the static. It started as a tremor inside the noise, a wet hiccup where numbers should be. Then a thin wail threaded the shortwave like someone had wired a delivery room into the sky. I knocked the volume down to a breath, but the sound came through the cabinet wood, through my wrist where I held it. Alive, desperate, insisting. Obituaries for Wednesday, the radio said, steel returning to its throat. It read two names like receipts and then broke itself. A shiver, a cough of snow, and baby Hale, time of birth unknown, time of death 306. Hale. My last name hung there wrong and right at once. I didn't know how long I stood without air. When I finally remembered to breathe, I dialed a number I had deleted months ago. Alexa answered on the second ring. Her voice was sleep-creased and wary, the way you sound when you've taught yourself not to hope. Eli, are you? I almost said happy. I said, are you okay? A pause that contained a room I wasn't allowed in. I'm fine. Are we? I swallowed. Is there a we? Another pause. I'm due in a week. The kitchen lurched. 306 was 4 hours away. I didn't ask permission to come. I ran with the radio under my arm like a stolen child. Her apartment smelled like lemons and old paint. A hospital bag sat at the door like a suitcase for a trip no one believed in. She looked smaller than my memory and stronger than it, too. She put a hand on her belly and tried to smile without making it complicated. It was complicated. What is that? She asked. A lifeline, I said, and set Sin on her coffee table. The broadcast resumed, courteous as a waiter returning with the bill. Baby Hale, time of death 306. The wail returned, softer now, like the radio itself was breathing around it. Alexa went gray. I opened the back of the cabinet with hands that wanted to shake. The letter about ratios lay where I'd hidden it. A sense, it said. A voice. A future. I had so few valuables left. Grief had already taken most of my shine. I listened for the part of myself I could lose and still live with myself after. Hearing, I whispered. The static brightened, like a cat lifting its head. Left ear, I said, because some bargains feel less real if you're specific. All of it. Full. Forever. The radio didn't ask if I was sure. It never does. Heat licked my ear like a match. Then a pop. Inside my skull, private thunder, and the world tipped. The clock's tick vanished on one side. My breath sounded like it belonged to someone standing behind me. I could hear Alexa say my name from the right, but from the left came nothing at all. A velvet absence that made the room half-night. 304. Call the ambulance, I said. She had already dialed. Her free hand crushed mine. The radio hummed, pleased, and the baby's cry unstitched from the noise and floated. Real now, not forecast. 306 clicked past. No announcement, no correction. Just the ordinary ugliness of sirens and the beautiful, vulgar panting of a woman refusing an ending. Later, in a hospital bright enough to erase sins, a nurse put a new human in my useless left arm. Healthy, she said. Stubborn. Alexa laughed and then cried the way laughter turns into prayer when it's out of tricks. I turned my head to hear with the ear that still worked and pressed the other against the tiny chest. Silence met silence. Somewhere, a choir lost its pitch by a hair to pay the difference. The radio back home on the table would list its updates. But in that hour, we didn't listen. We counted a heartbeat I could feel, not hear, and paid without asking for change. The archivist. She'd been collecting the broadcasts since 1949. That's how May introduced herself. Not with a handshake but a date, as if time were a membership card. I found her in the genealogy alcove of the library, surrounded by the noise of paper, the rustle of thin pages, the cough of a microfilm reader swallowing light. Her hair was white in a way that made you think of ashes before snow. When I said the number 7.431, her mouth shaped a small, tired yes. "I wondered when you'd come," she said, and slid a box toward me. Inside, neat stacks of index cards, each with a call number, a name, a time, a cause. Each card had a dot of red in the corner, as if a finger had pressed there on the worst night and never quite cleaned. "Every reading since the first," May said. "I was 12. My father tinkered with radios. He heard a voice count names and told me to sit and write. 'A ledger wants witnesses,' he said, 'or else it writes you instead.'" She fed a reel into the microfilm machine and a page bloomed onto the screen, the obituary section of a newspaper older than both of us. She tapped the margins. The increments match. Times, causes. 30% of the names never made it to print because something interceded. We recorded those too, the trades and their prices. We keep the ratio honest. "We?" I asked. "The caretakers." She said it matter-of-factly, like librarians or plumbers. There's always one the radio talks to and one who remembers what it said. My father held the dial. I filed the names. When he gave his voice, I took the boxes. Fair exchange. The word voice landed like a nail. "The letter in my cabinet," I said. "M's signature." "That was you." May smiled without joy. "It was my father's initial and then mine. We decided it could stand for mercy until mercy decided otherwise." She took my hands the way a nurse checks a pulse. "You've paid something already," she said quietly. "I can hear the imbalance in how you turn your head." "Left ear," I said. "Then you understand the math." She slid another card across the table. "Baby Hale," she'd written in her tidy hand. The dot in the corner wasn't ink. I asked her what the station wanted. She laughed softly. "Want is a human verb. The broadcast is a gravity. It isn't evil. It isn't good. Corrects. Our town learned to live with that like you learn to live with winter." On the wall above us, a clock clicked like a careful metronome. May let the sound count 3 beats. "There's one rule that isn't in your letter," she said. "The radio hates fame. When a caretaker tries to expose it, the signal widens like a flood. More names. So we bind it with privacy. We witness small. That's why I stay here where no one looks, and why you, I'm afraid, have to stop telling people." "I haven't," I began, and then remembered the neighborhood meeting, the jail, the sheriff's tired eyes. My life had been a megaphone lately. May's hand tightened. "If you make it public, it will buy silence with a crowd. You don't want to see what the price of a crowd looks like." She closed the box as if tucking a child in. "Come back tomorrow. Bring the radio. We'll read together. I'll show you how to hold the dial without letting it hold you." When I left, the library's doors sighed shut like a book finishing a sentence. Outside, the town looked unchanged. Brick and awnings, a bus sighing, a woman pushing a stroller past a shop window full of wedding dresses. I carried May's warning like a fragile thing, and the sky felt lower, tuned to a frequency only 2 of us heard. The archivist. She'd been collecting the broadcasts since 1949. That's how May introduced herself. Not with a handshake but a date, as if time were a membership card. I found her in the genealogy alcove of the library, surrounded by the noise of paper, the rustle of thin pages, the cough of a microfilm reader swallowing light. Her hair was white in a way that made you think of ashes before snow. When I said the number 7.431, her mouth shaped a small, tired yes. "I wondered when you'd come," she said, and slid a box toward me. Inside, neat stacks of index cards, each with a call number, A name, a time, a cause. Each card had a dot of red in the corner, as if a finger had pressed there on the worst night and never quite cleaned. Every reading since the first, May said. I was 12. My father tinkered with radios. He heard a voice count names and told me to sit and write. A ledger wants witnesses, he said, or else it writes you instead. She fed a reel into the microfilm machine and a page bloomed onto the screen, the obituary section of a newspaper older than both of us. She tapped the margins. The increments match. Times, causes. 30% of the names never made it to print because something interceded. We recorded those too, the trades and their prices. We keep the ratio honest. We? I asked. The caretakers. She said it matter-of-factly, like librarians or plumbers. There's always one the radio talks to and one who remembers what it said. My father held the dial. I filed the names. When he gave his voice, I took the boxes. Fair exchange. The word voice landed like a nail. The letter in my cabinet, I said. M's signature. That was you. May smiled without joy. It was my father's initial and then mine. We decided it could stand for mercy until mercy decided otherwise. She took my hands the way a nurse checks a pulse. You've paid something already, she said quietly. I can hear the imbalance in how you turn your head. Left ear, I said. Then you understand the math. She slid another card across the table. Baby Hale, she'd written in her tidy hand. The dot in the corner wasn't ink. I asked her what the station wanted. She laughed softly. Want is a human verb. The broadcast is a gravity. It isn't evil. It isn't good. Corrects. Our town learned to live with that like you learn to live with winter. On the wall above us, a clock clicked like a careful metronome. May let the sound count 3 beats. There's one rule that isn't in your letter, she said. The radio hates fame. When a caretaker tries to expose it, the signal widens like a flood. More names. So we bind it with privacy. We witness small. That's why I stay here where no one looks. And why you, I'm afraid, have to stop telling people. I haven't, I began, and then remembered the neighborhood meeting, the jail, the sheriff's tired eyes. My life had been a megaphone lately. May's hand tightened. If you make it public, it will buy silence with a crowd. You don't want to see what the price of a crowd looks like. She closed the box as if tucking a child in. Come back tomorrow. Bring the radio. We'll read together. I'll show you how to hold the dial without letting it hold you. When I left, the library's doors sighed shut like a book finishing a sentence. Outside, the town looked unchanged. Brick and awnings, a bus sighing, a woman pushing a stroller past a shop window full of wedding dresses. I carried May's warning like a fragile thing, and the sky felt lower, tuned to a frequency only 2 of us heard. The double. At 103, the radio read my name twice. Not once in warning, not once in error, twice with 2 causes like the universe was deciding which knife to use. Eli Hale, 814, electrocution. A breath, the static clearing its throat. Eli Hale, 814, blunt force trauma. Same hour, different end. The amber dial looked almost amused. A coin about to choose a side. I was in May's kitchen for the overnight watch. The radio centered on her table like a relic. Her house smelled like tea and old paper. She didn't flinch when she heard my name, only reached for a pencil and made 2 neat entries on separate index cards. Happens, she said, as if I'd asked about weather. Draft and final. Draft. My mouth had dust in it. May nodded. The broadcast rehearses sometimes. Tests the shape of an ending. If you tamper with the rehearsal, the final compensates. Usually worse. How worse? She didn't answer. She only touched the ledger letter crease at her elbow, as if to say, "You've read the math." I stared at my double obituary and tried to inventory my morning. The toaster had been spitting sparks lately. I taped the cord instead of replacing it. Electrocution felt plausible. Blunt force? Unless the ceiling decided to give up, or a truck found my ribs on the way to the grocery store. The hour 8:14 was my first coffee. Felt like a dare. What if I just don't move? I said. What if I sit in the middle of the floor until 8:15? The radio enjoys cleverness, May said gently, but not as much as it enjoys correcting cleverness. I put my hand on the cabinet. The wood was warm and patient, as if it had already known me 2 ways and liked the taste of both. On May's table lay a small pile of payments. A lock of hair and tissue, a tarnished ring, a child's drawing of a bus with 4 stick figures and a sun that had been erased and drawn twice. The room pulsed with other people's mathematics. "Detune?" I asked. The word felt like reaching for a weapon that had already bitten me. May shook her head. "If you detune a draft, you invite a spectacle. Remember what I told you about crowds? Drafts love crowds." The radio, as if polite enough to wait for its cue, offered, "Update." It read my name a 3rd time, this one a whisper concentrated into accuracy. "Eli Hale, 8:14, electrocution, confirmed." The second card remained, a ghost of a punishment. I tasted copper. "You can bargain," May said. "Shift the charge. Offer a finger for a minute, an ear for an hour. But you've already paid an ear." I pictured my daughter's chest beneath my dead ear. That perfect hush. Voice, the letter had said, equals a cycle. Lose your voice, finish the round. The thought pressed cold against my throat. "Not your voice," May said, reading the fear the way she read microfilm. "Not yet. The radio isn't asking you to end the story. It's asking you to honor it." I unplugged the toaster. I flipped the breaker. I spread a towel on the kitchen floor and sat like a student before a stern teacher. I offered the radio a smaller coin. "Taste." It brightened. At 8:12, something sizzled in the wall. At 8:13, a wire arced in the old plaster and the room flashed a white so pure it had a sound. At 8:14, I smelled nothing. No burning hair, no ozone, nothing at all, because the price had already been taken from my tongue. I lived. The toast I ate afterward was texture without meaning. A roof shingle on my teeth. The second card, blunt force, slid back into the stack. It hadn't been chosen, but it hadn't been wasted either. Drafts keep their hunger. The radio hummed, pleased to have taught a lesson without raising its voice. I tried to say thank you and found the word tasted like air. Harmonic debt. Saving 3 kids cost us an entire choir. The hook arrived as a news bulletin in the radio's throat. School bus, ice bridge, 9:31. 3 names followed, small as backpack labels, with causes that didn't deserve syllables. May didn't flinch. She slid 3 index cards toward me like a dealer who hates the game. "We can't stop the river," she said, "but we can retune who pays." "How?" "Harmony," she said, and led me to the library basement where the dehumidifier sang and the lights buzzed like anxious bees. On a steel table, she'd arranged a graveyard of radios. A Bakelite cathedral, a car boot transistor, a ham rig scarred by cigarettes. "One frequency is a blade," she said. "Several, close together, can be a chord. Chords spread the cut." Upstairs, a church youth choir practiced for Sunday, thin voices chasing a hymn, while the river outside rehearsed winter. May set each radio to a near neighbor of 7.431 megahertz, half steps the ear can feel without hearing. "We'll braid the cost," she said. "Not erase it. Never say erase." The broadcast began its countdown of endings, precise as a metronome. Bus approaching bridge, black ice, driver corrective action fails. May nodded to me. I placed my palm on the first cabinet. "Taste?" I whispered. Mine had already been spent, and felt the radio decline politely, the way a ledger refuses a currency it doesn't take. "Offer community," May said. "Something made of many throats." The choir upstairs climbed a verse and stalled, then found it again. I looked at the ceiling as if I could see harmonies through plaster. "Pitch," I said, hating the thought as it formed. "Permanent." The dials brightened like embers choosing to be fire. We tuned tighter, millihertz by millihertz, until the 5 radios throbbed against one another. A slow-beating phantom tone that made the room feel like a chest with a second, larger heart. "Now," May said. "Obituaries for Friday update," the original voice said. The bus skidded in its sentence. 3 miners, trajectory altered, exit achieved. In my head I saw it. Steel kissing ice, a slide toward a bright wrong sky, then a sideways grace into the shallows where a willow took the blow like a blessing. Alive, alive, alive. The price walked down the stairs a moment later, invisible but heavy. Above us, the hymn bent, not off-key, exactly off-true. The soprano's shimmer was an ache. The alto's backbone sagged a fraction. The tenors found their notes, and those notes refused to stay home. It was as if someone had filed the teeth of a key and the lock would never again accept it completely. May sat. Her hands were empty and shaking. "They'll still sing," she said, to convince both of us. "Just different." The radios cooled with the smell of struck matches. I wrote the trade onto a card, my pen feeling like a scalpel. 3 children spared from river. Debt collected. Choir loses pitch. Permanent. The word permanent behaved itself on paper in a way it never does in life. At 9:31, the river swallowed only air. At 9:34, sirens came anyway because that's what towns do. They show up to the days they might have had to bury. The kids cried in the backs of ambulances, offended by the world in the healthy way that means they will grow up stubborn. The choir, that Sunday, sang like a door just slightly out of square, a beautiful sound that carried a bruise. In the pew, I felt both victories and knew which one would echo longer. The sheriff's hour. He jailed us at midnight to protect the town. That's the hook he tried to sell me with the handcuffs. "This isn't punishment, Mr. Hale, it's quarantine." Sheriff Lockwood's mouth was a straight line that had practiced hard. He took the radio like it was a weapon, 2 fingers under the handle, the way you carry a snake you respect but do not like. May and I rode in the back of his cruiser while Main Street watched from behind its eyelids, pretending not to see. In the bullpen, the clock hummed on 23:59 as if it were warming up to say something cruel. Lockwood set the radio on his desk, face toward him, as if the amber dial belonged in his jurisdiction. "You've spooked half my county," he said. "People are unplugging appliances like it's Y2K. I'm cutting the cord for a night." May folded her hands and turned into a librarian statue. I tried to keep my voice away from pleading. "If you keep it, you keep the names. If it reads yours, what then?" "It won't," he said automatically, and flinched at the grammar of hubris. Midnight clicked. The radio took a breath the room could feel. "Obituaries for Saturday," it said, courthouse brisk, and then it stepped over the line Lockwood had drawn. "Sheriff Daniel Lockwood, asphyxiation, 043. Deputy J. Mendez, 045. Deputy Cole, 049. Lockwood's hand found the volume, but the words came through the wood like termites. He looked at me the way men look at doors that used to open. His deputies glanced at him and then away, like dreamers waking. "Turn it off," Mendez said. "It doesn't off," May said softly. "It only pays." I could feel the ledger's arithmetic starting to gather itself like a storm. A jail is a box built to hold bodies. Boxes amplify outcomes. "You need to get everyone out," I said. "Open the doors, put them in the parking lot, break the geometry, or give it a trade big enough to bend the hour." Lockwood stared at the keys on his belt and saw not brass but choices. "We can't release prisoners on the word of a record," May said, tapping the desk where she would have filed the death of this building. "You can keep them under lights and eyes. Just put them under sky." 029. I could hear air getting heavier, the way rooms thicken before a storm. The radio offered a polite option. "Caretaker may submit settlement." "What do you even have left?" Lockwood asked, angry because fear had put its hand on his shoulder. "Not much," I said, and meant it. "But the ledger loves oaths." May's head snapped toward me. "Careful." I put my palm on the cabinet. "Take my word," I said to the voice in the wood. "A binding promise. I'll keep the station. I'll finish the cycle. My voice stays until it doesn't." The radio brightened as if something inside smiled. "Provisional," it said. "Collateral accepted." The air unknotted by a thread you couldn't see. Lockwood didn't wait for theology. He unlocked cells. Men shuffled into the parking lot in paper slippers, squinting at the moon as if it were a parole board. Deputies counted heads, then counted again. 043 came and went like a held breath released. No rope, no blue-lipped hour. The building exhaled. The radio made a small satisfied noise. Ledger balanced for now. Lockwood handed it back as if it might go off. "I don't like owing you," he said. "You don't?" I said and caught May's wince. "You owe the broadcast." On our way out, the clock ticked once, loud as a gavel. My throat felt tight, as if a signature were drying there. The sheriff's hour had passed. Mine had advanced. May's broadcast. At 2:11, the radio said her name. "Obituaries for Sunday." The voice began, businesslike as a clerk filing God. Then, "May Whitcomb, 82, intracranial hemorrhage, 243. May didn't gasp. She sighed the way librarians do when a patron dog-ears a page. She slid her index cards toward me and lined up a fresh one with the neatness of a last will. "Don't touch the dial, Eli." The amber eye watched us. The tubes hummed like bees who knew the garden by heart. "I won't let it," I said, and felt the lie stand up inside my mouth. "You've paid enough," she said softly, "and the ratios get greedy at the end." The cabinet skin was warm under my palm. In the brass belly behind it lived the letter about equivalence, the arithmetic I kept pretending I could negotiate with charm. The ledger listed what the radio would accept. Senses, possessions, futures, memories. It did not accept love. That made love the most expensive thing in the room. "May?" I said, "Please." She folded my fingers away from the dial the way a teacher closes a book you're not ready for. "This is my due date. I've been checking it out and renewing it for 70 years. Let the catalog work." 2:27. Her kitchen smelled like tea and lemon oil. The clock's second hand tiptoed. Upstairs, a pipe knocked like someone rehearsing a door. The radio's breath thickened. Out the window, the town lay on its side, sleeping with one eye open. I thought of the ledger line I'd written after the jail. Collateral accepted. Voice promised. My throat still carried that indent like dried ink. I thought of my daughter's small chest beneath my dead ear, and how silence had taught me to hold still. I thought of May's first box of cards dated 1949. How a child had sat at a table and turned grief into order. How that child had grown into a woman who kept our town on time with nothing but paper and resolve. 2:31. "Don't," she said again, and it sounded like a blessing disguised as a command. I turned the dial. A hair left, a millimeter of disobedience. The static trembled. The voice stuttered, corrected, reached for the nearest name with an M and a long vowel, a neighbor for death to borrow. "Update," it said, displeased and precise. "May Whitcomb detuned. Substitution required." The cabinet warmed. The ledger inside shifted its weight like an animal rising. I felt it sniff through my head, polite and merciless, seeking a fair exchange. "Memory is a currency," the letter had said. "Familial draws the largest bills." "Take mine," I whispered. "Take." It didn't wait for nouns. A coolness swept behind my eyes, a curtain closing where a window had always been. The kitchen blinked. May's face sharpened. Behind it, an absence bloomed. I tried to recall a laugh that used to fill a room, a Motown chorus over burnt toast, a hand on my fevered forehead. I tried to say her name and found only a shape where sound should be, a mouth with no story. My mother was gone from me, not dead, worse, erased. 2:43 passed like a held breath released. The radio recited nothing. May's pulse tapped on her wrist, steady as catalog numbers. She stared at me the way people do when they see lightning land somewhere else. "What did you give?" "I don't." The sentence broke. "I had a mother," I said, and the words sounded like a rumor. May stood, crossed the small kitchen, and held my face in both hands. Tears surprised me by their temperature. "You shouldn't have," she said. I couldn't not. She made tea because that's what you do when the world opens a trapdoor. You heat water and name the cups. We sat while the radio cooled with the smell of struck matches. On the brass under its skin, a new line wrote itself in a hand I knew too well. Whitcomb spared/Hale forfeits maternal memory, total. At dawn, we watched our street yawn awake. Dogs tugged leashes. A bus side. Somewhere a hymn reheated in a choir that had learned to sing around a bruise. May slid the saved card into her box and touched my wrist. "I'll remember her for you," she said, "until you can afford to again." The radio's amber eye dimmed, satisfied. Outside, the town looked unchanged: bricks, awnings, sky. Inside, a room I used to live in had been rented to darkness. The town that forgot. Morning came and nobody knew who I was. Not a metaphor, an erasure you could stub your toe on. I walked into the coffee shop where Anna once drew crooked hearts in foam, and she looked past me like I was a smudge on glass. "Next?" she called, and my name didn't open her mouth because it wasn't a key anymore. I held up cash, then my driver's license. The plastic reflected my face, my address, my organ donor heart. Everything in place. Anna stared at it and frowned. "It's blank," she said, and handed it back like it might leak. On my street, the map felt misprinted. My mailbox still said Hale, but the paint looked embarrassed to be specific. Mr. Patel at 101 waved the way you wave at a traffic cone. "Morning," he said, neutral, the safest word in English. When I said his name, he started a sentence and never found the noun. The twins from 103 jogged past and left a silence shaped exactly like where my greeting should have fit. I rang Alexa's buzzer and felt every nerve prepare for a door that would open on a life. Through the speaker, a voice I had built 1,000 futures with said, "Who is it?" She used a tone reserved for salesmen and saints. I tried to say, "It's me," and the pronoun behaved like a lie. Upstairs, a baby. My baby. Laughed a sound I recognized with the ear that still worked. The buzzer clicked dead. I carried the radio to May as if it were a subpoena. Her library smelled like old thunder. When she saw my face, she didn't flinch. She reached for an index card the way a nurse reaches for gauze. "Tell me the symptoms," she said gently. "Everyone forgot me," I said, and heard the sentence land like a chair dragged across linoleum. May nodded once, librarian brisk. "Collateral matured," she said. "You promised a voice. The ledger took a chorus, your town's memory of you. It's how the broadcast ensures quiet." I opened the cabinet. The brass belly of the radio had new writing on it, neat as a charge on a statement. Hale, community recall, localized, forfeited, cycle stabilized. A small tear cut the metal where the tool had slipped, a punctuation mark that looked like a sob. "I don't want to be a ghost," I said. "You're not," May said. "Ghosts have stories. You get to write yours again." I laughed, and the sound startled me by being private. "How?" "Witness small," she said. "Leave notes only you can read. Bring the work here. We'll file the days under their proper names. You keep the radio. I'll keep you." We tested reality like plumbers checking for leaks. I stepped into the hardware store. The clerk asked if I needed help finding anything and meant it like a new language. I dropped my wallet on the sidewalk. A teenager sprinted to return it without ever looking at me. In the grocery, the scanner ignored the loyalty number linked to my existence and beeped politely for a stranger. The world had memorized my outline and forgotten the word. That night, I sat with the radio humming like a cat that owns the house. The amber eye watched me the way fire watches paper. "Obituaries for Monday," the voice said, and I wrote the names as if they were the only proof that language still knew how to remember. When it finished, I opened a fresh notebook and printed a headline across the first page. Eli Hale. I traced the letters until they felt like a prayer you muscle into belief. In the margin, I wrote the simplest sentence I could afford. "I am here." Then, because the ledger had taught me the value of plural, I added the rest of the truth. For now. The auctioneer. He sold pieces of the signal to collectors. Not antiques, outcomes. In the basement of the Masonic Hall, under exit signs that glowed like bored angels, Calder Rusk laid out his wares on velvet. Copper coils wound into pendants, thumb-sized bandpass filters in cigarette tins, a shoebox of crystal slivers labeled with dates. He was the man from the estate sale where I'd bought my radio, his smile lacquered thin, His voice a hush customers leaned toward. Artifacts from retired frequencies, he said. They won't stop a bullet. They will teach it to misunderstand you. The room smelled like old carpet and cash. 30 people, maybe 40, couples with clasped hands, a nurse still in scrubs, a teenager with a bruise he pretended not to notice. Crowds are ratios waiting to happen. May had warned me, the radio hates fame. Fame just means many throats to pay a single bill. Rusk lifted a pendant. The copper caught the fluorescent light, a halo with a hangman's intent. A narrow notch at 7.431, he purred. Wears like jewelry, works like a guardrail. Fate will take the nearest name. Nearest. I felt the word land like a mislaid step. He wasn't selling salvation. He was selling detours. I set my radio on a folding chair. Its amber I half-lidded. Patient. Calder, I said. My voice the kind you use when a dog has something poisonous in its mouth. You're not redirecting lightning. You're throwing it into the crowd. He smiled the way men smile when they've learned to live with their reflection. Buyer beware, he said. Also, buyer alive. Obituaries for Tuesday, the voice said from the chair, polite as a clerk. Heads turned, then turned away. A few people crossed themselves without theology. Rusk clapped once, the sound bright and cheap. Demonstration, he said, and raised a hand to a stagehand with a rope. Over the aisle, a metal lighting tree released a fraction, swung and stalled. A calculated accident. A volunteer under it flinched. The pendant around her neck glittered. She wasn't touched. The radio inhaled. Update, it said, already tired. Additional decedent. It read a name I didn't know. 2 blocks away, same minute. A man whose only jewelry was a wedding ring. A murmur moved across the room like a breeze that had learned grammar. Rusk shrugged. Correlation, he said. We live inside coincidences. Debt collection, the radio said through its teeth. I picked it up. It was warm, like a tool choosing a hand. How much to close this market? I asked, not Rusk. The amber I turned toward me, and the voice answered in maze arithmetic. A possession that contains a life. Ratios scrolled in my head. Ring, dress, locket, home, home. My key ring weighed on my palm. Nickel worn to soft where my thumb had prayed it smooth. A grocery tag. The bottle opener my mother once called a sin with a smile I no longer owned. I lifted the ring. Take the house, I said. Take the idea of it. Erase it from the registry, from landlords, from the cheap map in my bones. Let these sales end and let his list burn. The radio did not deal. Collected. Heat kissed the keys. Then they went light, irrelevant. Somewhere across town, a lock forgot my name. In the courthouse basement, a line on a deed blurred to polite silence. The space where I slept became a room anyone could have rented from a story I wasn't in. Settlement accepted, the radio said. In force. Rusk laughed, small. You can't outbid demand, son. But the pendants dulled like pennies left in milk. The tin's little filters sighed and cracked. The crystal slivers clouded, their dates running like mascara. On the folding table, a ledger caught fire without flame, the paper browning from the middle outward, the ink surrendering first. The crowd made the sound you hear when people realize they've been close to a cliff. Some cursed. One prayed. Most left quickly, the way you leave a room where someone has coughed blood. Rusk tried an exit. The radio followed with a cashier's calm. Calder Rusk, 2106, myocardial infarction. He stopped, hand on the door, as if a locked heart could be negotiated with. He turned to me once, baffled that the market had not loved him the way he loved it, then sat very carefully on the edge of his empty table. I carried the radio up into the night. The hall behind me smelled like hot dust and ruined plans. On the brass inside the cabinet, a new line wrote itself with needle neatness. Auction dispersed / hail forfeits home. Total. I walked a town that no longer owed me shelter and felt the wind move through the keyholes my life had left behind. A funeral in reverse. We dug someone up to keep them alive. That sentence doesn't want to be true, but the radio made it a rule. Obituaries for Thursday, it said. then read a name I recognized from the cemetery 2 blocks from the river. Walter Bryn, 74, interred last winter, time of death 1:26. The amber dial held steady as if daring me to notice the contradiction. Dead already and scheduled to die tonight. May didn't blink. She pulled a shoebox from the back of her pantry and set a cassette deck on the table, the kind with gummy buttons and a hiss baked into its throat. On the tape, her father's voice scratched through 40 years. If the ledger calls a buried man, it means the story that made him dead was misfiled. You can't resurrect him. You can only move the paperwork. Protocol follows. The cassette clicked, then a list unrolled like a spell. Arrive before the listed hour. Unfasten the coffin seal. Allow air. Do not allow light until the trade gives consent. Present collateral of equal narrative weight. A memory that keeps a family together, or a vow that keeps a man intact. Reseal. Rebury. The death, now satisfied, will pass over as a winter storm might skip one house and cave in the next. May met my eyes. We're not stealing a life. We're redirecting an audit. Walter Bryn had a daughter who ran the flower shop with the quiet geometry of grief. She had already buried a husband and the old dog that slept under the register. He wasn't supposed to go, she told anyone who bought lilies in January, and the town had agreed, nodding like judges with empty gavels. Midnight found us at the gate, shovels soft in frost, the radio in a satchel humming like a live insect. We worked fast, not reverent exactly, but careful the way thieves are careful. The earth gave back what it had been given. At the coffin seal, I felt the ledger tilt toward us, listening. What will you pay? May whispered. I had so little left. Half hearing, a dead tongue, a home dissolved from the map, the town's memory of me already repossessed. I thought of my daughter, of how names keep people on the right side of a door. I thought of the word I still owned. My name, I said. To her. I nodded toward the flower shop in my head. Let his daughter forget me completely. Remove me from the part of her life where gratitude could turn into debt. The radio approved with a warmth that filled the satchel like breath. We cracked the lid. Air moved the way a sigh does when it decides to live. We did not look. We spoke the trade aloud, names or bridges, and sealed the wood again with the care of men building a boat they'll never sail. At 1:26, a wind ran its hand through the cemetery and went on. No correction, no pronouncement. The radio offered a single word. Settled. By dawn, the dirt lay again like a sentence finished. We washed our hands in the river that had almost taken 3 children and hadn't. In the flower shop window, Walter's daughter was arranging peonies with the fierce tenderness of the saved. She glanced at the glass and didn't see me at all. On the brass belly inside the cabinet, a new line etched itself. Bryn deferred / Hale forfeits personal recognition. Bryn family, total. Felt right and wrong at once, like most of our math. On the walk home to nowhere, I tried my name on the air. It held. The world heard it. Some people even turned. But not her. In the ledger's language, that was mercy. The radio purred on the table, patient as a judge between cases. The tape clicked itself off. May poured tea. We didn't toast. We didn't pray. We wrote it down, filed it true, and pretended, for a breath, that digging up a man had put him properly to rest. 2:17. At 2:17, the house remembered how to die. Not my house. I don't have one anymore. But the hour itself, wearing my mother's last breath like a uniform. The radio woke me with the exact tone it used the night it first said her name. Amber dial, patient hum. That clerk's voice reaching back through time and pulling the same thread. Obituaries for Monday. It began, and I heard the rhythm before the words, the way you know a hymn before the first note. 2:17. I was on May's sofa, a blanket that smelled like library sun over my knees. She was already up, index cards aligned like ribs. When the voice said, Maria Hale, 54, cardiac arrest, 2:17, May didn't look at me. She looked at the clock the way you look at weather. It's circling, she said. 8 years is the cycle. A signal breath. Whoever begins it must close it or the town gets erased. Not bodies, Eli. Footnotes. Street names. Family recipes. The choir's bruise. We become the blank the radio writes on. How do you know it's 8? She slid a card from the bottom of the first box. 1949. My father's first. Then 57. 65. 73. She tapped dates with the eraser like candle wicks. Every starter died or yielded their voice. The years the cycle didn't close. Paper goes missing, deeds misfile, weddings nobody recalls. People live forward and find the past has no hooks. I touched the cabinet. The brass under it would felt warm with a number I didn't know until I knew it. 8. The ledger letter had whispered it all along, voice equals a cycle. I had promised voice as collateral at the jail. Provisional, the radio had said. Today felt like the due date. I'll buy it, I said, because purchase was the only verb I had left. I'll end the round. At what cost? May asked. Mine. She nodded once, and that blessing landed heavier than any prayer. Then we do it properly. We return the hour, not the woman. We set the station to listen to itself. At 1:40 we drove to the rail yard scrub where station 731 kept its dead skeleton posture against the sky. The stars were a language I couldn't hear with my half-ruined head. Inside, the racks stood like pews. May placed my radio on the desk and tuned the ham rig beside it to 7.431 and its neighbors. Half steps, a low chord that tasted like iron on my tongue and like nothing at all because I no longer had taste. Catechism, she said, as if reminding an altar boy. Broadcast, predict, settle, ledger. The voice came through the building instead of the speaker, polite as a judge who already knows the verdict. Caretaker, payment. My voice, I said. All of it, permanently. Heat rose under my jaw, a match struck in marrow. The world hushed. Not quiet, but hushed, the way crowds do when someone stands. I mouthed a sound and heard nothing, not even from the good ear. Silence didn't fall. It lifted, taking me with it. Update, the station said. Cycle closure. Confirmed. 2:16. May squeezed my hand hard enough to leave her in my skin. She spoke into the mic the words I couldn't. Rescind recursion. Leave the dead to their day. Let 2:17 be only a minute again. Outside, the wind changed its mind. The hour uncoiled. At 2:17, nothing happened. So completely nothing that it felt like a miracle. No fridge hiccup, no furnace pause, no metronome needle marching across my mother's chest. A normal second clicked past like a small boat slipping the dock. The town held. On the brass inside the cabinet, a new line etched itself without sound I could ever hear. Cycle closed / hail forfeits voice. Total. May's tears hit my knuckles like rain on warm stone. I smiled and didn't hear it. The amber I dimmed, satisfied. We walked out into a night that had agreed to be ordinary again. Behind us, 731 breathed once and went still. Ahead, the streets kept their names. The choir's bruise stayed where we'd left it. And my silence, at last, belonged to everyone. The caretaker's choice. The radio asked me to choose its next owner. Not in words, it hasn't needed mine since I traded them, but with light and ledger. At dusk, the amber dial began to blink in a pattern even silence can read. One long, two short, pause. A slow, patient SOS. Inside the cabinet, new lines etched themselves without sound. Custody transfer / required. Nominee, infant Hale. The needle quivered like a finger pointing at the future I refused to give away. May set a yellow legal pad in front of me and a pen that writes even on bad days. It's time, she said. The station always asks while the last sacrifice is still warm. I wrote, blocky and simple because grief has made me a kindergarten hand. Not my child. The dial brightened, almost cheerful. Successor probability, optimal. Longevity, high. Obedience, likely. It listed my daughter like a statistic, weight, blood type, the time she first cried through static, and I paid with my ear. The radio was right about her odds. It was wrong about what a father is for. May's hands hovered over the cabinet the way you hold them near a candle you're not ready to blow out. You can choose yourself, she said, but the ledger will ask for something you haven't paid yet. I didn't have to be told the currencies. The letter had taught me the menu. Senses, possessions, memories, futures. Voice equals a cycle. I'd given that. Home gone. Taste gone. Town's memory of me gone. What else? The answer arrived with the heaviness of a true thing. Time. I wrote, "Take my years." The wood warmed under my palm. The brass belly ticked like cooling metal. Specify the cabinet inscribed, neat as a notary. May pressed her lips together. Be careful. Vagueness is how men drown. I swallowed and put a number on paper because numbers are how this thing listens. Every year after my daughter turns 18, caretaker equals me until then. After that, she decides freely. No predictive claim on her. The radio considered. Static rose and fell in the room like waves counting. Then a new clause burned into the brass. Term, 18 years. Collateral, remaining natural lifespan. Hail. Airship, voluntary. Pause. Condition. Interim silence windows required. May's eyebrows climbed. It wants quiet, she said. Scheduled dead air. It hates crowds. It fears fame. It will accept Sabbaths. I wrote, then buy them. Take my past where it speaks. Strip my voice from every recording, every message, every dusty tape that could teach her what I sound like. Leave her the body, not the echo. The cabinet warmed in agreement, the way a sleeping animal approves by not waking. Archival erasure. Executed. It inscribed. Somewhere in town, voicemails blinked to emptiness. A home video sagged into silent pantomime. A young man lifting a baby while the air around him forgot the trick of his sound. May squeezed my wrist. Are you sure? I nodded. Then sign, she whispered. I took the pen. On the inside of the cabinet, beneath decades of bargains written in other hands, I printed my name like a man carving it into a tree he won't live to see grow. Eli Hale, caretaker / until she can choose. The dial's amber I softened, less a lamp now than a heartbeat at rest. The voice did not speak, but the station's certainty moved through the room like weather changing. Transfer deferred. Custody. Confirmed. Silence windows. TOB announced, the brass recorded, and the last line cut deeper, as if chisels were eager. Interest paid in quiet. May slid the cabinet shut and we listened to the new kind of hum. Not the broadcast's appetite, but a machine learning to fast. Outside, the town held its shape. Inside, the future did too. In my coat pocket, the legal pad rustled with the sentence I'd written without letting myself read it until now. Not my child. Not yet. Pay me in years and stillness. And leave her a choice. Dead air. For the first time, the radio went silent. Not the polite hush between names, silence with edges, the kind you can cut your finger on. At dusk, the amber dial pulsed once, like a lighthouse choosing not to save anyone, then dimmed to the color of old honey. The brass inside had warned me. Silence windows. TOB announced, but I hadn't expected the town to hear it too. Streetlights came on a beat late. Dogs lifted their heads at nothing and found it heavy. The choir, still singing around its brews, stopped mid-vowel and felt the note fall through them like a trapdoor. I couldn't ask what it meant. I wrote on May's legal pad, "This is it." She read the words and nodded as if we'd reached the turn of a page she'd long memorized. "A fast," she said. "You bought quiet. Now it's collecting in one body." The hour thickened. In kitchens, timers forgot to ring. At the jail, Lockwood stood in the corridor and felt a rope that was not there go slack. At the river, the willow that had once saved 3 kids remembered how to bend. No names. No ledger breath. The whole town held the same small prayer. Let nothing be scheduled. I placed my hand on the cabinet the way you touch a sleeping animal you don't want to wake. The wood was cool, not indifferent. Resting. I wrote, "Thank you." The dial didn't brighten. It didn't need to. Gratitude is a currency with no exchange rate here. We waited. Silence learned our furniture. The refrigerator, once a nervous metronome, decided not to count. On the library's microfilm reader, the light bar floated like a quiet coffin. May brewed tea and didn't pour, as if sound might break the spell. I thought of my daughter, how somewhere her chest rose and fell, a private metronome the world had not yet priced. When the window ended, it did so like a held breath let go. Not a blast, not a trumpet, just the world remembering how to tick. The amber dial woke to a low glow. The voice returned with a courtesy I almost admired. Obituaries for Tuesday. It did not say update. It did not say my name. It read 2, then 3, none of them ours. The town exhaled, then pretended it hadn't been afraid. Afterward, when the kitchen had the old hum again, I opened the cabinet. New lines had etched themselves while we listened. Silence window/observed. Interest paid in quiet. Beneath, a smaller clause cut in the tight hand of inevitability. Next window, offsite. May traced the letters without touching them. It's moving, she said. The hunger travels. That's part of the mercy we don't much like. We carried the radio to station 7311 last time. The building held its dead posture reverence. Pews of empty racks, dust like patient snow. I set the cabinet on the desk that remembered other hands and wrote on the pad. You owe us nothing. We owe you nothing. Go. The dial blinked. Not assent, not refusal, recognition. The voice spoke once, gentle as math. Ledger balanced. We locked the chain behind us as if locks meant anything, and walked into a night ordinary enough to believe. Somewhere, far from our choir and our river and our cautious sheriff, another town would mistake a quiet hour for peace. A caretaker would hear a voice where static used to be. They'd scramble, learn ratios, pay in senses and years and rooms and names, and then, if they were lucky, buy themselves a pocket of silence and feel it hold. In my pocket, the legal pad whispered as I moved. On its top line, my block letters kept their promise. Eli Hale, caretaker / until she can choose. The radio, tucked under my arm, hummed like a machine between jobs. We walked home, whatever that word meant now, counting seconds that belonged to no one but us.